In the last video, we learned that planning is simply the process of thinking about what's required in order to achieve a desired outcome. It can be that simple. We also learned that different types of planning require different types of results, and in order to get different kinds of results, we need to use different ingredients, methods, and approaches. Hi, I'm Liz Moore with Planning School, and in this lesson, we're talking about the differences between the three categories of planning: project, management, and strategic, so you're better equipped to use the right type of planning to fit your needs. Most people, even at an experienced high level, aren't exposed to planning process education. And because of that, whenever I teach this lesson, I find that people are surprised to learn that maybe they didn't know what they thought they knew about planning. Let's get into it. There are three categories of planning, and almost all planning activities will fall into one of these: project, management, or strategic. One of the most important things to understand about types of planning is to understand the purpose of each. When it comes to project planning, the purpose is to aid in the completion of a specific activity. In management planning, the purpose is to guide ongoing operations. And for strategic planning, the purpose is to identify and create change. We're always looking for easy thought models to keep things straight in our heads, and here's a way to think of the types of planning that might help you understand the differences. Project planning is a tool for getting it done. Management planning is a tool for keeping it moving. And strategic planning is a tool for determining what's next. Let's look at some examples of each. In project planning, it's no surprise that we have good old-fashioned project plans. We also have things like new program designs or new service launches. Those are examples of project plans. Event plans, disaster plans, integration plans. These are the types of things you might see categorized as project planning. Remember that management planning helps you with ongoing operational activities. So your classic business plan fits here. So do things like marketing and resource management plans, financial or board development plans. Also, long-range interpretive plans and visitor use plans are considered to be management plans, foundation documents, and general management plans too. And finally, some examples of strategic planning. Of course, your strategic plans fit here. We call our strategic action plans. You also have things like feasibility plans, growth and expansion or right-sizing plans, evolution or next chapter plans, and even succession plans might fit here. Another helpful way to understand the differences between the planning types is to consider the common term or length of the plan. So how long will this plan be in effect? How long will we be using this plan? Project plan lengths vary. They depend entirely on the length of the project. So it could be shorter in term, like a 2-day project, or it could be longer in term, like a 2-year project. Because management plans are for your ongoing operations, the length or term of your management plans are also ongoing or even semi-permanent. These plans remain in place even though elements of the plan might change or be updated over time as needed. Because strategic planning is used to identify and create change, the length of your strategic plan will depend on how long you need to make that change or to make that transformation that you're aiming for. In today's fast-paced, rapidly changing world, you should look at your strategic plans being anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Longer than that becomes irrelevant. So with strategic planning, remember that you create a plan to create this transformation, and then you completely execute that plan from start to finish. And when you're done, you start over and you make a new plan for that next chapter and execute the new plan. Another way to understand the differences between the types of planning is to think about what it is that you know when you initiate planning. When you start project planning, what is it that you know when you begin? Well, you already know what you're trying to complete. You know you're trying to complete this project with these specific outcomes that are required. but you don't yet know how you're going to accomplish it. So you're doing a planning activity to understand the how. Management planning helps you plan for ongoing operations. So what is it that you know when you go into management planning? Well, you know what it is that you're trying to manage. You know what your operations are. You may know that there needs to be some tweaks or some changes, but you know that you're planning for management of operations. You don't yet know how you're going to manage those operations. So your planning activity is to help you understand how you'll do it. So, what is it that you know when you initiate strategic planning? Well, usually you go into strategic planning knowing that you need some sort of change or transformation. Sometimes it's very subtle change or transformation within the organization, like you want to improve the environment so your team's not so burned out. Maybe it's some sort of big, bold change or transformation, like you're aiming for a goal that you want to reach. But the thing is about strategic planning is that usually you initiate it without complete clarity about what the end result of that change or transformation will be. It hasn't been fully articulated yet. So we say that when you initiate strategic planning, you don't know what exactly it is that needs to change. You haven't fully articulated that piece yet either. And you don't know how to make that shift because it hasn't been clarified yet. I interrupt this programming to tell you the thing that all of us need to be reminded of over and over again, and that is that strategic thinking, strategic acumen, and strategy are not the same as strategic planning. We use strategic thinking, strategic acumen, and strategy in all forms of planning. Of course, you need to use strategy and strategic thinking in your management planning and in your project planning, but that is not what makes it strategic planning. All right, back to the show. This is one of my personal favorite ways to explain the differences between these categories of planning, and it is, what do you do with your plan? You complete a project plan as you complete your project. You implement a management plan for your ongoing operations, and you execute a strategic plan for the transformation that you're creating. Let's look at the level of detail you should expect to see within each of these types of planning. Relative to management and strategic planning, project planning has a higher level of detail. Even though the plan may be for a shorter period of time, the level of detail for that time period will be more. There's usually more specificity in the action items, detail about who's doing what and what, when, what they need for it, how they'll do it. There's usually things like material lists and instructions and names of people responsible for action items, and even into the detail of things like shipping information or color of flowers. And then with management planning, it's usually a medium, maybe even a medium high level of detail. But for example, you wouldn't have the name of who's responsible for something or the time at which they might be doing it, but you would probably have the name of the department or branch that's responsible for doing some activity and the outcomes that are expected. Strategic planning should have a relatively low level of detail. It should focus on high-level direction about where you're headed, what it is you should be doing or accomplishing, and how you'll go about getting it done. But it should have a low level of detail. When we have a low level of detail, it's easier to adapt and make changes when the unforeseen happens, when things pop up that we couldn't expect when we were doing the planning. With a high level of detail, it's harder to make those adaptations and changes. And that brings us to the level of flexibility of these different planning types. That's all about, can the plan adapt to unforeseen change and still be useful for you, still be relevant for your needs? Project plans don't typically have a lot of flexibility. I think of an example from my days working in aircraft manufacturing. We had a very specific schedule project plan for each airplane that we were building, and the parts were arriving at a specific time so that people could be installing or building parts of the airplane at a specific time. And if anything changed, if the shipping changed or a person was sick, the whole project plan became at risk. So there wasn't a lot of flexibility within that project. And that's the nature of project plans. They tend to have low flexibility. Management planning has a low to medium level of flexibility. Here's another example. In your management plan, there may be specific things that your marketing department does, and they're the ones responsible for those activities. And if something happens within that marketing department where they can't be doing those activities, it's hard to shift them outside of that department. It's doable, possible, but there may be some consequences for that. So there's less flexibility than there could be, but there's also more flexibility than a project plan. Our strategic plans should have a high level of flexibility. If you think about the fact that strategic plans are meant to help you create change and transformation, one thing that you can expect is that if you're trying to create change, there's already a lot of unknown built into that endeavor. So for example, if you're trying to get to the moon and you've never been there, well, there's probably a lot of unknown that will pop up as you're trying to accomplish that goal. So you need a plan that will allow you to adapt to all those unforeseen changes. How do you keep your strategic plans more flexible? Well, you need to be really clear about what it is you're trying to create, or the change that you're trying to create, or the transformation that you're making. You need to be really clear about that and committed to that. And then be less committed to how. Be flexible about how you're going to accomplish it. Be less attached to how you'll get there. So that's one of the key things with strategic planning. Know what it is that you're trying to do, but be flexible in how you're going to do it. One of the reasons that we see strategic plans fail is because people build them like their management plans or project plans and build in low or medium level of flexibility for how to execute the plan. And so once something changes and they can't continue with the how that they initially planned for, well, all of a sudden the plan doesn't work anymore and it goes and sits on a shelf. Here's another mental tool to help you understand the differences between the types of planning. You can think of project planning as a recipe. You follow a recipe to get a predictable outcome. You can think of management planning like an instruction manual. An instruction manual will tell you how to do something. It'll also give you some options for how to troubleshoot when things don't work properly. You can think of strategic planning like a map that gets you from one point to another. So on this map, you know where you're starting and you know where you're trying to get to. You might even be able to pick out a few checkpoints along the way that help you know your progress, but it's a map. It gets you from here to there. Here's one last way to think about the differences between these types of planning and maybe step outside the box just a little. Let's talk about the nature of these types of planning. Both project and management planning are operational in nature, so they're of or pertaining to the operations of your business, nonprofit, or agency. Strategic planning is transformational in nature, so this is the things that are of or pertaining to what needs to be transformed, changed, different, hopefully better and more impactful in your business, nonprofit, or agency. We've looked at a lot of different ways to understand the differences between project, management, and strategic planning. And here's the thing, this is not an exact science. So some of the things that are core elements of one type of planning will be useful in another type of planning. And as we continue to learn and develop our own skill sets, we'll be able to use all of these skills and all of this knowledge to make all of our planning activities more rich and more useful. We've covered a lot of detail that hopefully gives you clarity about the different types of planning and maybe even gives you a better idea of what you've been doing and what you might need in the future. In the next lesson, we'll explore the relationship between operational and transformational work and how project management and strategic planning work together to help you be more effective.